Deepa, you must really sleep well.
Well, it didn't
You
start
seem
off
very
like that
calm.
for sure,
Yeah.
because there were decades of poor sleep due to being in a bad marriage for 8 years and then subsequently divorced and having a child with a chronic condition which required constant vigilance. And until I think my health took a turn for the worst, I didn't wake up and realize about the importance of sleep. But yes, now totally sleep is priority number one. I think it's the tool to all healing. Any protocol to work, you need sleep in place.
I absolutely agree. I think I see that even within like us as women and even children, when we sleep, we're so much more regulated with our emotions versus when we haven't. And so yeah.
So, might I share my screen? And there are not
Yeah,
too many
sure.
slides, but it'll just, I think, give you some. When we're looking at visuals, I just think when somebody talks, everything comes together when there's image. So, I'm a big person for visuals.
Totally. Go ahead and pin your presentation. If any issue, just meet will help.
Can you see my presentation? Is that fine?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So as I walk through this, I thought perhaps if you would just refrain from asking questions for about 20 minutes, I can go through everything and then absolutely we can talk about whatever comes up. But just in to get us started, I think some flow is required. Please feel free to jot down on your phone or a paper if something pops up and you think you might forget that later. So when we're looking at women's sleep and hormones, they're really like 3 points of a triangle, and all of them come together in this synergistic way. Each of them interplay with the other. So, just to get us started, because I work in a practice where I merge this science of functional medicine with ancient Ayurveda, I think it's very important to look at this subject from both perspectives. So, first, this very first slide is just to look at what these two schools of thought talk about when it comes to all health. So, in Ayurveda, we're looking at this trifecta of good food, which is based upon that unique person, good sleep, nidra, and brahmacharya, which is about the right sexual usage. So, where it's not suppressed and where it's not expressed too much, because the sexual fluid is related to longevity. And in functional medicine, the three pillars of all health are blood sugar balance, smooth elimination, and good sleep. So, as you can see, the overlap there is really in sleep. So, that just tells us that ancient wisdom, modern science, everything is talking about how critical sleep is. I mean, think about a three-legged stool where sleep is important in both these perspectives, which are divided like 5,000 years apart. So let me know if you don't see my slides change, and I've changed my slide now. So just starting with a bit of an overview into Ayurveda. So there are two concepts which is called Prakriti and Vikriti, and I promise I'm not going to make it too theoretical, just to give you very practical understanding of this concept. Prakriti is the understanding that we're all born with a very fixed, unique body constitution, and where if we were to know what is our body constitution, it gives us a blueprint as to what we should eat, what we should do, and it's almost like a codification of different body constitutions where we can utilize that information in a way where we've got this whole structure laid out for us on what we must do. So Prakriti, there are these three doshas, Vata, Pitta, Kapha. They come together in different permutation and combination, which decides this constitution. So somebody who's predominant Vata could be prone to dryness, feeling cold, constipation, dry skin, dry hair, anxiety, poor sleep. Someone who's predominantly Pitta is fiery, so they'll have this tendency to have acidity, heartburn, headaches. Somebody who's Kapha will have this too much of the earth, so they'll have a tendency to hold on to water. They'll have a tendency to hold on to weight. So Prakriti is a fixed constitution. Vikriti is called a present state of imbalance. So we could be any constitution, but at every moment in time, we could have imbalance or balance in any of these three doshas. So understanding these two aspects of any individual tells us what we should do to restore balance physically, emotionally, psychologically, all of it. So just a few things, and all these are sourced from my book. So there's a lot of detail. You can absolutely go read up there. But to get us started from an Ayurvedic perspective, how do hormones and sleep and women interplay with each other? One of the main aspects is that in Ayurveda, it is said somebody who's very predominant Vata Prakriti, Vata constitution, tendency for lightness, dryness, will have a tendency for sleep issues. They will also have a tendency for low levels of hormones in the body. So you see, they gave this codification that if somebody has this tendency for poor sleep, they'll also have a tendency for low hormones, estrogen, progesterone, and vice versa. So these two are always influencing each other. Vata also, because when we say high Vata, it sounds a bit strange. So what does high Vata mean? High Vata actually refers to what modern day talks about as being in a predominant fight or flight, where we are always heart racing, breath is too fast, body temperature is too fast. So this inability to calm down, this always being anxious and alert, that is what ancient wisdom referred to as a high Vata state. And there are a lot of connections with the doshas. For example, somebody who's got a lot of Vata will have a tendency for sleep issues, anxiety, and low hormones. Somebody with high Pitta will have hot flashes, heavy bleeding, and of course, these are also impactful on sleep. And somebody who's got high Kapha, too much of water, they can build up water in the throat, which is what will get picked up in modern day medicine as sleep apnea. So this is just a few connections between women's sleep and hormones. Now this slide, which I'm showing about Agni and Shukra Dhatu, is an extremely important concept for women to understand. So what is Agni? What is Shukra Dhatu? Let's start with that. Agni is what is a simile for a digestive fire. So this ability, think about our gut like an oven, where whatever we put in, the food we put in, that oven has to be able to cook it, take out the nutrients, nourish the body, and get rid of the waste. So Ayurveda believes that the body does not digest food and spread nutrition all over the body at once. No, it doesn't do that. It does it in a very logical manner. So from the small intestine, it goes nourishing 7 tissues in order. So it starts by nourishing what is called Rasa Dhatu, or the blood plasma, then Rakta, Mamsa, Meda. So basically lymph, blood, muscle, fat, bone marrow or nervous system, and then the endocrine or reproductive. Now you don't have to get too caught up in this information. What matters is understanding that if there is weak Agni, the poor digestive health, nourishment will not reach the seventh tissue, which is called Shukra Dhatu, which is the ancient word for what today we call ovaries, our sex hormones, the ability, the tissue that releases estrogen, progesterone. So if we have weak digestion, we can't reach that tissue. So having some food which is targeted as this magical hormonal food will really not support somebody if they've got poor quality digestive health. So the only thing to take away from this slide is that Agni can only work in two ways. And that really removes all this chaos of information out there in the web world, which is so overwhelming with information today that we have to bring it back to let us know that it can only work in these two ways. Either it's balanced Agni, which means your Agni can break food into what is called Sara nutrients, which then goes to 7 tissues and nourishes Shukra Dhatu at the end, which is our progesterone, our estrogen, our GABA, serotonin, the neurotransmitters, all that is required to keep us balanced, happy, stable mood. And then it can get rid of the waste. If it's imbalanced Agni, two things will happen. One, we won't have the nutrients reach the tissues. Two is that the food that is not digested well will cause something called ama, which is toxins, and they can go to whichever tissue in the body which is vulnerable for that person, and then it can cause problems. So for somebody, that ama will show up as joint pain. For somebody, it will show up as autoimmune challenge. Somebody will show up as pimples, rashes. So it's so simple if we look at it from this concept. Now let's come to a bit of a functional medicine perspective about this trifecta of women's sleep hormones. For sure, if we are not sleeping, we are going to have improper hormones. If we have imbalanced hormones, we don't really sleep well. So there's this bidirectional axis. So bladder challenges can absolutely disrupt sleep because for one, we are going on waking up to go to the loo, and an irritable bladder can make us want to drink water, because if we don't drink water, we're so uncomfortable. And which woman doesn't know the agony that comes from bladder challenges? It's just that, oh my God, I've picked up an UTI. We all know how that feels. So bladder challenges absolutely impact. Low progesterone. Now, when we look at hormones, because women have to have good levels of both estrogen and progesterone, they both do a role, but we also need them to be in particular ratios. So if somebody is estrogen dominant and low progesterone, they can have migraines, heavy bleeding, anger issues. So many things come from estrogen dominant, low progesterone, depression. So many women diagnosed with depression and put on antidepressants actually have low progesterone, and typically if they're addressed at the root, they don't need to be on antidepressants for that. And then of course there's iron, which plays a key role in how thyroid hormones behave. Lack of iron causes restless legs, which impacts sleep. It affects our mood. Again, it raises a tendency for depression and mental health challenges. Any drop in hormones at the cyclical phases of our menstrual cycle can impact us in different ways based upon our unique body. And the body temperature fluctuates dramatically. So in the second half of the cycle, it raises core body temperature. And there's a lot spoken about how we need low core body temperature for our body to be able to fall asleep. So for some reason, if we are having an elevated body temperature, we can't really fall asleep. And progesterone is sort of a code, it's the starter. So unless in ovulation we release progesterone, we don't have the ability to reach neurotransmitters like GABA. So when a woman ovulates in mid-cycle, if we release good levels of progesterone, that progesterone signals the brain to release this GABA, which is what somebody with good progesterone levels after ovulation, they feel like world is such a happy place. Otherwise, you know how we feel before the period or at different phases of the cycle, we can get absolutely overwhelmed with all that's happening around us. And then there's this very important slide I have here on understanding these two perspectives when it comes to stress. I think if you were to ask me, is there only one thing I can do for myself? I would say make it a daily habit to calm down stress. Now, if we look at this image, we can see the two perspectives. In functional medicine, now cholesterol is from the food we eat. If we eat foods with fat, and if our liver is working well, our gallbladder is releasing bile, and we're digesting those fats, from that cholesterol, our body can produce two things, cortisol and progesterone. Now, if we are having too much of stress, the first thing the body will do is produce cortisol. It will shut off progesterone. So if we are perpetually in high stress, we will naturally have low progesterone. So that's the first physiological working. From an Ayurvedic perspective, it's the very same thing. It is said that high stress state is what is called high vata in Ayurveda. If we have high vata, the whole body dries up. So vata has a quality of being cold and dry. So if the body dries up, then everything dries up. This ability to release sex hormones, reproductive tissue, all get compromised. So this is the understanding of how important stress is. And that's why all my clients, the very first thing I'll tell them is forget about food, forget about supplements, herbs, anything. First, make sure you have one mindfulness practice in place every day, be it lying on the ground in the afternoon, doing 10 minutes of shavasana, or sitting and doing some breath work. But it's very, very important that we don't have stress coping tools just as SOS. We need to have it in place every single day. So we're training our body every single day to withstand. Now, this again, a very important slide. If you've ever heard of the term adrenal fatigue is referred to the adrenal gland is a gland that sits on top of the kidneys. Adrenals are what produce cortisol and aldosterone. Cortisol is a vital nutrient. We can't survive without it. However, high cortisol starts to cause inflammation in the body. So adrenal fatigue from a functional perspective is referred to as stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. So in stage 1, all that's happening is, let's say we have somebody who's very ill around us and we sleepless for a month and we are constantly stressed, then that stage is called adrenal fatigue stage 1, where we are simply more stressed than usual. Now, the second stage, what happens is that after a while, you're pumping up so much cortisol to cope with this, that even if the situation of stress passes, you go to bed at night, you're so exhausted, but when you lie down, you can't fall asleep. It's called wired and tired. So you're just revving up at night and you're exhausted, but you can't fall asleep. Excuse me. Adrenal fatigue stage 3 is where after a long time of battling this constant stress, the adrenal gland gets so fed up, it can't produce cortisol anymore, where even if you sleep a long time, you don't have recovery. Now, if you see, Ayurveda described it very similarly, that the very first thing to happen is vata goes up. So this is that stage 1 where cortisol is pumping up. The second stage where everything is active is that high vata makes you anxious. You're not able to fall asleep. So if you're in this high vata state for a while, you don't fall asleep. Finally, it depletes something called ojas, which is a sort of a substance beyond the seventh tissue, which is what today, modern day, we call our immune system, our neurotransmitter. So if somebody keeps falling ill a lot, it's a sign that they have low ojas. So if you see, really, they're saying the same thing. Then finally, I'm just going to quickly wrap this up with sort of, you could take a picture of this if you like, but these are some of these key points when it comes to balance in this trifecta, women, sleep, and hormones. First of all, that Ayurveda has a whole concept of a clock, and the beauty is that whatever modern day is talking about cortisol rhythms, melatonin rhythms, was described by Ayurveda in a different way. So 10 p.m. Pitta time of the day starts. So they said if you're not asleep by 10 p.m., you will find Pitta revving up, and then you'll have cravings at night. Your mind will get very active. So go to bed before 10 p.m. And that is also the time where the cortisol spike happens if you don't fall asleep. Then if this adrenal vata chart, which I showed you earlier, the very key point for that is that don't have low-fat diets. Low-fat diets are extremely dangerous to women. We really need good fats. Even if you're vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian, omnivore, don't have a low-fat diet. And because stress is such a key player, make sure that there's some breath practice, be it a simple Brahmari or simply lying on the ground with a bag of rice on your belly and just trying to double the time of your exhale as compared to the inhale. Then, of course, as we are in a community today of moms, you know the importance of nurturing the good ones and trying to keep away from the ones which deplete us. And for sure, we all have somebody in our life who depletes us and we can't change that. If so, we certainly need some practices to calm down. And Ayurveda spoke about food as a balanced plate of 6 days, not as keto or paleo or vegan, but as bringing in all the tastes. And the simplest way to do that is just to have 4 components on the plate: 1 whole grain, 1 protein, 1 vegetable which is sweet or watery, so your lauki, carrot, beetroot, sweet potato, pumpkin, which nourish tissues, and 1 vegetable which is leafy green or cruciferous. These are very bitter in nature, so they allow the liver to be clean. And to these 4 components, adding good fats, good spices, things like that, and making sure digestion is stable. So always favoring cooked warm foods. And there is a whole microbiome in the reproductive tract, and the vaginal microbiome is a very key one for women. And you'd be surprised that in Ayurveda, there's a lot of connections spoken about the health of the vaginal microbiome and our mental health. That both can dry up. So if we have challenges with frequent vaginal infection, we can also have tendency for mental health challenges. Not overdoing exercise. So for sure, somebody who's having struggle with low hormones and poor sleep, if they are doing excessive marathons and HIIT workouts, they're going to still crash progesterone. So it's very important that if you are in that sort of a situation, to be mindful of getting the right type of exercise. And I think for me, the greatest tool to improve the health of my hormones has been switching off my devices by 5 p.m. to 5 a.m., which, except for today, it's a sacred thing for me that 5 p.m. all devices are off. Nobody can reach me. So whatever is your time, it could be 7, 8 p.m. But if you make up your mind trying to stick to it, because it's very easy to dysregulate the nervous system simply from that frequent scrolling. And temperature regulation is a big player in all health of the body, especially the microbiome, be it in the gut, be it in the vagina. So if a woman is heated up or feeling cold all the time, both of those need to be countered with the opposite. So if someone's feeling cold hands, cold feet, they definitely shouldn't be doing cold soaks. They need to be doing warm soaks. If there's somebody who's feeling hot flashes, they shouldn't be doing saunas. They should be in a swimming pool. But doing oil massage can help all of us. It helps us to better regulate temperature. So that's it from me. We can go into some questions if we're there. And that's my book. You can absolutely take a picture of that and look out for it.
Thank you so much, Deepa. A lot of amazing takeaway. And I think a culture is so beautiful. All the answers are right within Ayurveda. And as I get older, I'm kind of leaning more and more and kind of wanting to understand what our scripture and our ancestors had to offer. So thank you so much for all the insights. And now I'm like more than excited to just like, to like prioritize sleep. Sometimes life gets busy, we're hustling, we're working, and sleep sometimes tend to get pushed, and especially as mothers with everything, we always prioritize way less. So thank you for this session, and if anybody has any quick question, unmute and please go ahead and ask her. Anybody has any quick questions or comment?
Thank you so much, Deepa, for your wisdom and everything, because I'm also a yoga teacher and into nutrition, and I'm a certified nutritionist and certified. So it's a great takeaway for me today from your session. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Anybody else have anything to say? And meanwhile, I want to give a quick reminder for those of you who are in Bangalore. Look forward to seeing you all this weekend. Deepa, if you're around, I would love to have you come in person and be around. You're based in Chennai, right?
No. I live in Hosur, just an hour from Koramangala.
Oh, really? You're right around, then you must come. I'd love for moms to come meet you and say hello to you. And you just have such a calm vibe. And we need some of those so we can, know how to calm our nerves when we feel like sometimes we want to sleep, but as you're saying, like our brain is overactive and it takes a while to turn our brain off to go into the sleep state. So,
yeah.
I guess it's like a practice. Sometimes we've lost that over time. I think as kids, we were sleeping so well, and as adults, we kind of lose that ability to just fall asleep. So, yeah. Anything else, Pratiksha?
Deepa, I just had to ask one myth today. I think probably you're the best person to answer it. This is coming from a neighbor of mine, and she's been my neighbor for more than 10 years now. Every time I get a pitta, of course, I mean, I am, a mom. I've been in the corporate. Now I'm not. Now I'm kind of got a break, and I'm doing something else instead. So she always told me whenever I had a pitta is to swallow a raw garlic. Can you please tell me if that's true? Because I don't know why I did it, but then still it's like, okay, it's still a natural ingredient. It's not really a medicine. Either ways, garlic is good even in some way. But she literally kept pestering me on that. And I failed to ask her why. Probably because I was just in my mom brain, okay, fine, just do whatever it is or something like that. But I feel I would have this lovely answer. As it is, we are all about spreading knowledge at one day or the other. So what would be your honest take on that? Have you heard it or seen it, or is it something?
I think there's so many nuances to what you asked that first of all, I think it's important to understand what do you mean by pitta coming up. So it's very important, no, because sometimes people, when I say pitta, they say, oh, I don't have acidity. So understanding what is vata, what is pitta itself is so nuanced and it plays out differently in everybody. So sometimes it's not as simple as what is pitta. So you have to ask, what is that pitta? And for sure, pitta and garlic are enemies. So one of the things that is written in the text is that somebody who's got a tendency for pitta aggravation should avoid onions and garlic because they are, Ayurveda describes the taste, madura, lavana, right, kattu. So basically sweet, sour, salty, bitter, pungent, astringent. So each of these doshas get calmed by certain tastes and get provoked by certain tastes. So onion, garlic are the enemies of pitta, and they're highly stimulating. They're irritating to the gut in raw form, and they're highly sleep disruptive. I remember once telling somebody, stop talking about coffee everywhere when you're talking about sleep. Talk about eating raw onions and garlic at dinner. They're going to keep you awake for sure. So, a pot of garlic blended raw into a hummus. I make sure I always saute that garlic if I'm blending it up into a hummus. So never ever have that raw. And finally, not to, at the cost of, this is not about ego or anything, but one thing I do request everybody who asks something is that, information, we are living in a world of information bombardment. So always take the advice from somebody who is qualified. So we wouldn't go take how to manage our money advice from our neighbor. So why do we take health advice from our neighbor? They could be really well-meaning, but they're not qualified to be making those. They don't understand. Even if it's worked for them, they are different, you're different. So I think we must keep that in the back of our mind, that health is so nuanced and understanding can take decades, and to be really cautious of getting information.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I guess like we always get advice from all direction, whether it's
Yes.
for health, or whether it's parenting, whether it's anything, everybody has unsolicited advice. And we just have to take it from one ear and let it go and just keep what matters to us. With, as you were saying, we're in a world where there's bombardment of information from all direction. And one of the reasons we do what we do is to bring reality. Because think about how many times do we really go into YouTube and hold that attention? Because we know it's like, I can go anytime. So we tend to kind of pass it. Versus something like this, when we know that, wait, it's all real people and we're having real conversation and it's not some fake thing that's being read from somewhere. It brings that authenticity and also allows people to kind of really be attentive and pay attention to that, like whatever that hour that we're spending on this conversation. And of course, in person is even more real. So that is one of the attempts we do here at Mompower360. Mompower360, an empowering community for moms just like you and me.